Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is episode 13 in the How to Become a Craft Fair Organizer series. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to market vendors for your show. So, recruiting vendors that you'd like to have participate in your event. I've got a lot of tips jam-packed into this episode, so let's just go ahead and dive right in. All right, so the first place that you want to start is to create a Facebook event page. Now, you should already be set up with a page on Facebook that's related to your craft fair organizing business. Now, an event page is basically like an extension off of a page. Okay, so it's a place that has details of an event that people can invite other friends to, and it starts to gain traction as time goes on. So you'll want to create this for every single show that you host. One of the things that you want to have on there is basically just all those basics you want to have covered. You want the event flyer, so the graphic of whatever the event is. Sometimes there's colors, sometimes there's a certain name of the event. You want to have all that put together on a flyer. Then, of course, the date, the time, the location, how many vendors in total you're going to have at the event. That's another important thing that you want to have on there. And then any special attributes to your show that make it kind of like a nice selling point. So, for example, if you have food trucks or if you're going to have live music, these are some key features that you can sort of boast about your show to make it more appealing to a wider audience. Now, one thing that I should mention on Facebook is that scamming is prevalent on Facebook, probably more so than anywhere else in the craft fair world right now. In the last 5 years or so, scamming has gotten a little bit out of hand, and particularly on Facebook. What's happening is people are posing as event organizers, and they're essentially undercutting the actual organizers of the show, and they're trying to recruit vendors, and they're saying, oh, pay me on Venmo or pay me on Cash App for a booth at this event, when really they're not the organizer. And vendors, you should be doing your due diligence and kind of checking all of this out. There's a few different methods for this. You can be sure that you're following the actual organizer's specific instructions. So go to their official page, go to their official website, and see how they want you to apply for an event. Another method is to contact the venue itself if you're really kind of on the fence about it, and ask who is hosting the event, and if they are able to provide a link or some kind of contact information for the organizer. So sometimes you can go that route as well. But just safeguard yourself both ways. If you're a vendor or if you're an organizer, just be very cautious about what you're doing on Facebook and provide clarity. So if you're creating a Facebook event page, be very specific and clear how you want people, potential vendors, to apply to be part of your event. Okay, so that's going to put everybody at ease and just provide a little clarity that will help prevent scamming. Now, this next tip pairs hand in hand with the last one, and that's to post in Facebook groups. So not only should you have a Facebook event page set up, but you should also be sharing to groups. Now, as your business page, you're going to want to join a whole bunch of Facebook groups in your area relating to arts and crafts. Sometimes just arts and crafts in general, or more specifically, vendor groups or people who enjoy craft fairs. You can get a little bit more specific with it, but just be sure that you're kind of casting a wide net in your area and joining as many groups as possible. Then you're going to want to share the event page in those groups seeking vendors. Now, just be sure to read each group's rules, because every group is different. They have their own set of rules, what they do and don't want posted in their group. Some groups will allow you to recruit vendors in them, and then other groups don't want that happening. Maybe it's for a different purpose. Maybe it's not for recruiting vendors, but you can advertise that the event is taking place so that visitors can come check it out. Just check all those rules out so you know basically how to treat and handle each group. But Facebook groups, that is a huge market of both really vendors and visitors that you can tap into in order to drum up some interest for your event. Now let's talk a little bit about Instagram. So remember that Instagram is probably the most common app used by folks in the art and crafts community. Instagram is strictly a visual app, right? So we're dealing with visual arts. There's a ton of artists and crafters on Instagram. So this is definitely a resource that you should be using to connect with artists that you admire, and also as a way to potentially recruit them to be part of your event. So you can use Instagram story and you can use Instagram posts. There's a few different options for you on there. So just be sure that you're kind of utilizing everything and connecting with your local artists and vendors. Now, this one is a little bit of an old school method, perhaps sketchy these days because I don't know how many people are still using it, but it's something to consider because it's easy and it's a free source to potentially attract vendors for your show. And I'm talking about Craigslist. So, yes, there is a little bit of dust building up on this website. It's very old, but you never know. You never know who you could attract on here, especially when it comes to visitors. So I know that this video in particular is talking about recruiting vendors for a show, but there are, like, particularly kind of on the old timer side, some older folks who still use Craigslist for some of the basics, like the local classifieds for events that's happening in their area. So definitely keep this in mind. It's free to post on there and it can't really hurt. So definitely go for it. All right, so another option that you have is local newspapers. This can kind of help to fill in the gaps that social media doesn't cover. You want to get the event listed online and in print somewhere. Now, I say somewhere because there's different types of newspapers. So every major city has kind of like that big newspaper that, is kind of like covering the whole city, major thing. That's one route that you can go. Another route that you can go is a lot of cities or areas will have kind of like weekly or even just monthly, sort of like artistic newspapers where they're a little bit more, I don't know, for lack of a better term, kind of like underground. Sometimes these are good to seek out. So think of the ones that are in your area that you can utilize that maybe the artist would connect with a little bit better than a standard newspaper. Maybe you use these different methods for attracting different people. Okay, so perhaps you used the local kind of niche newspapers as a way to attract vendors, and then you use the big newspaper that might be a little bit pricier, but yet it goes out to a much wider audience for attracting visitors to your event. Play around with this, see if you can find some patterns that work for your area, and capitalize on those trends that you see. Okay, and hopping back online for a moment, you want to be sure that your event is listed on Google Events. Keep in mind that Google is the largest search engine in the world. Everybody is using Google, so you want to be sure that your event is listed on there. So Google it, make sure it pops up, and if it isn't, be sure to get it on there. Another great resource online is to list your event on event websites such as Eventbrite, Event.com, fairsandfestivals.net. These are just a few examples of websites that we would use in order to post our events on. So see if you can find as many of these as possible and get your event listed to them. It's a great way to get some attention on the show, and vendors have definitely noticed this with our events in the past. We had a lot of people reach out to us based on particularly fairsandfestivals.net. We had some good traction on there. So there's quite a few of them out there, these types of websites. Make sure that you have a spreadsheet, some sort of way to keep track of these and keep track of where you're posting and when you're posting. Okay, so that's definitely a nice tip there, is to make sure that you're accounting for all these websites so that a bunch don't slip through the cracks and then you kind of missed out on potential opportunities. Okay, so like I have before many times on this channel, we're about to talk about your email contact list. So you want to send out a mass email to your entire contact list. You should have your contacts grouped and assigned in a way that you can email just vendors. So you don't basically want to have people all grouped together in one contact list, okay? Because then your email is going to be going out to everybody. And sometimes you just need to email certain people. Maybe all vendors or new vendors, or emailing vendors that you've worked with in the past. It's nice just to kind of have people grouped together. So You want to send this email out announcing the show. So when you first book it, when you first have those initial details all hashed out and you kind of have a vision for the show, you've got your flyer set, there's pretty much like branding in place. And you want to do this especially after you've created that Facebook event page, because the event link is something that you definitely want to put in this email to start building that Facebook event page awareness up. So once you've got all those basic, ideas and all those essential details established, that's when you want to send out the mass email and let all the vendors know, hey, I'm recruiting for this show, want you to be a part of it, and attach that vendor application directly to this email so that they get it and there's no kind of middle ground that they have to go through. Make it as simple as possible for the potential vendors. Don't send them off on a wild goose chase online where, they have to go here, then they have to do this, and they have to do that just to apply. Just cut out as much fluff as you can and get right to the point, and that'll save a lot of time, and it's going to keep people's attention too. So that's really important. Vendors have a lot of opportunities. There's many shows in metropolitan areas and even in rural areas. Honestly, there's a lot of events and vendors have a lot to choose from. So you want to make it very crystal clear and clear cut for those vendors. So I've mentioned an event flyer a few different times, but let's talk about what that kind of looks like. You want to design an event flyer that advertises the event, and you want it to be eye-catching. All right. So think about the colors that you're choosing. When you have fonts or different writing on there, hold it back. And if you're printing off a flyer, maybe just do like a test run on your printer at home. Or if you're doing this all digitally, say like for instance on Canva, what I like to do is zoom out so that the design gets smaller and smaller. And you never want to like design your flyers with like your entire screen as the flyer. Okay. Like that might be fine if you're doing like little edits or something, but to test out how it's going to look visually, be sure just to kind of like zoom way out so that it's a smaller image. And then that way you can kind of see how it looks from a bit of a distance. And that's going to help you quite a bit with colors and contrast and making things stand out and making things nice and clear on the flyer. Sometimes in my earlier days of designing flyers, what I would tend to do is just overstuff them a little bit with a bit too much detail. And like it just became too much to read at one time. Posters and flyers are meant to kind of just catch the eye. And, you don't have to have every single detail about your event on the flyer. You want to have like those few basics, make it eye-catching, but most importantly, make it legible so that people can read it. Once you have your flyer, you can go ahead and start distributing that. So think of places around town or just in your general region. Again, try not to think about a specific pinpoint right by the venue. Cast a bit of a wide net because you don't know where vendors are going to come from. Okay, so some vendors are willing to come from a little bit of a distance. So cast a bit of a wide net and put these flyers around. And that is another great way to drum up some interest and recruit some vendors for the show. Of course, you want to have some sort of contact information on there. So an email address is great. Or if you have a .com website, that's cool too. But think about art and craft supply stores or other community event boards that you can put this flyer on. Now, another thing that you can do is consider having an event partner or sponsors. This will increase the footprint of your event, and its marketing may be able to reach vendors that you might not have if you didn't have a partner or a sponsor. So in a very general sense, to kind of boil it down, the more people who know about your event, the better, and the more likely you are to attract the type of vendors and the caliber of vendors that you'd love to have at your show. Now, for the next topic, we're going to talk a little bit about this because there's definitely some debate on whether it's appropriate or not to visit other events as a means of connecting with and potentially recruiting vendors for your event. So when it comes to this practice, I want you to keep the following in mind. you should never interrupt a vendor's chance to interact with customers. That should go without saying. Okay. So if you see a vendor that you really like at a show and you're like, man, it would be awesome to have this vendor at my event, you just never want to rob them of opportunities with customers. Okay. So they're already at a show. They've dedicated time, energy, money to be at this event in order to sell to people. They didn't necessarily, dedicate all of those resources to talk to you, an organizer of a different event. So you really have to take that into account. Okay. So just, approach them, and it's okay to grab business cards and follow up later. So maybe if you don't want to take up any of their time or anything like that at a different show, it's okay to grab a business card and follow up with them at a later date. I think most vendors will say that they're fine with that. Now, if you go with this method where you email them, later on that day or another day, just be sure to make it personal rather than some sort of mass email to a bunch of new recruits. Okay, so you don't want to treat them like that. Get to know the people. They are people, not booths to fill at your show. Okay, so when you do reach out, say for example, you go to a show and there's like 5 business cards that you've collected because you thought the booths were awesome, you thought the vendors were intriguing, all that stuff. Just reach out to those people individually, okay? Because that's going to go a long way in them really knowing that you have an appreciation for their work and that you want them as an individual to be at your show, okay? So just again, treat them as individuals if you follow up with them at a later date. Now, one thing I want to mention is that I definitely would not recommend bringing your vendor applications to a different event as a means of recruiting vendors. This is a really aggressive approach that increases the chances of being disruptive or angering the organizer of that other event. Okay, so that's just a move that you don't want to make. It's very tacky. And I've heard of plenty of shows and even been a part of a few shows where this has happened, and even like other organizers have come to our events and it's like, please don't do this. So, yeah, it's a move that's way too bold and aggressive. Okay. So there's different ways that we can do this that are a little bit more considerate of everybody involved. Now, if the organizer of the event, say you've gone to a different event and you've talked to like a couple of vendors that you're interested in, if they take offense and they ask you to leave their event, just politely do exactly that. Okay. So making a scene or being disruptive about it helps no one, not yourself, not the other organizer, and not the other vendor. You're not going to make a good impression on them if you're being a combative organizer. They're not going to want to work with that. So think of all people involved. Okay. So again, if the organizer takes a little bit of offense to that and all that, just be fine with it. That's it. They have every right to say that. That's their event. And if they want you to leave, then that's fine. So this is one of those reasons why people are on the fence about this strategy of recruiting vendors in the first place. Okay. Because some organizers do take offense to this, and even some vendors do as well. So, it's a little bit of a 50-50 thing where some vendors I've talked to a lot where they actually welcome this, and they say sometimes this is, the way that I've found out about great shows is just from the organizer meeting me at an event I was already at. So it's a little bit dicey. My suggestion and my recommendation is just do it the right way. If you're going to do it, just be considerate and do it the right way. Now, in a general sense, as an organizer, don't be afraid to sell yourself and your event to vendors. Like, what sets you apart from other organizers? Is it just your organizational skills? Is it the fact that your vendors won't have to guess about any aspect of your show leading up into it? Set them at ease. Okay, so if that is a big attribute that you've worked on is your organizational skills, don't be afraid to sell that. Okay, so think of all the different ways that you excel as an organizer. Are you able to attract a big audience? Do you have a strong reputation with past vendors? If you have your own website, what I would do is go ahead and just paste any kind of positive feedback that you've gotten from either visitors or vendors, honestly, either way, onto your website. So I would have a specific page or a specific tab on there that says testimonials or feedback, something of that nature that basically helps to establish credibility as an organizer. And when vendors see this, it's going to help them to give them confidence in you as an organizer, because they're investing a lot in you as an organizer, and to see these testimonials will definitely go a long way. And then when you're marketing your event itself, always remember to pitch the event with all of its perks, its amenities, and its features. Think about it from the potential vendor's perspective. Would you want to be part of an event you're describing to people? Sell it. What makes your event awesome? So we kind of talked about selling yourself, and then we talked about selling the event. And sometimes, you got to do both, and there's nothing wrong with that. Take pride in your event. Now, of course, the first year of a new event is always the most difficult to attract quality vendors. There's no track record to work off of. So you'll notice as the time goes on and as the years go on, that you'll start to build a positive reputation for organizing a particular event, and vendors will begin coming to you rather than you having to invest considerable effort into attracting vendors that you want at your show. Okay, so you got to kind of put that legwork in the beginning, and then as time goes on, it will become a little bit easier. Now, I know that I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but when it comes to marketing for vendors, you want to make some sort of a spreadsheet style checklist for all the ways that you've marketed for vendors to ensure that you don't forget one of your methods. It's also nice to add dates into your spreadsheet to show when you last marketed in a certain way. Like, for example, we touched on earlier, posting to Facebook groups. A lot of times certain groups will have a rule where you can only advertise your event like once a month. So it's nice to kind of have a date in there to help you know when it's time to spread the word again. So this is something that you can do on maybe like a monthly basis, is to look at this spreadsheet, see where you're at, just make sure that you're on pace and on track with all your marketing efforts for the vendors, even for the visitors, and just for the event as a whole. Okay, so just keep yourself organized, and it's going to pay dividends later. Now, I hope that you've enjoyed today's video. This was episode 13 in the How to Become a Craft Fair Organizer series. If you liked this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Building a great community here, and I'd love to have you be part of it. So to check out all the other videos in the How to Become a Craft Fair Organizer series, click on this playlist above, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.